10,000 megawatts on her power grid. In the last 18 months, Nigeria has put 1,000 megawatts. Standard International's benchmarks, 1 gigawatt of power for 1 million people. Which means if you have 200 million people, you need 200 gigawatts. We are struggling. We're not even sure where. We shall know that we are producing, at least we are distributing 4. Some say our nameplate production capacity is 12 gigawatts. But when did nameplate capacity turn on any lights? We say, every time you talk about anything, government, government, government. And yet we don't pay taxes. Just saying. As I argue, there's an evolution happening, and we're not paying attention to it. Once upon a time, there was a social agreement between the people and the government. And the agreement was a very simple agreement. We, the people, will not pay taxes. In return, we shall not ask what you do with oil money. Kind of worked. From the 1970s, oil money was awash, aplenty, we spent it, nobody paid taxes, we were all very good. All of a sudden, oil is behaving the way oil behaves. It's very volatile. Prices are down, unpredictable. Government is looking for money, taxing all of us. We're refusing to pay taxes, and yet we want the government, in the face of non-payment of taxes, to deliver on services. And the people in government also haven't figured it out. That, okay, it's not a problem. Why don't we allow the markets? There are things the markets will not deliver. Please don't get me wrong. Yes, I come from a libertarian school, which says, okay, my favorite economist, Friedrich von Hayek, the road to serfdom, if you will. But for me, this is a capital deficient country. And I've said this time and again and again. Our infrastructure upgrade, our own plan, Nigeria's domestic plan, requires us to spend $100 billion every year for 30 years. If you put all the states and federal government budgets for 2019 together, it's $57 billion. If they spent all the money on infrastructure, it will not deliver half of what they need to deliver for 2019. I don't put this because I see people bowing heads and scratching heads. It's not to irritate or to upset. It's simply that we are now at a point where reality must come home. We must begin to realize what we are as an economy, what we are as a country, what we need to be. I said to an audience this morning, 30 years ago, 1989, average income per head for China was $310 per head. Note the figures. $310 per head 30 years ago. Today, China's average income per head is in excess of $10,000 over a 3-decade period. But guess what is even more fun? You look at the first industrial revolution, the second industrial revolution, now we're the third, okay, now we've started the fourth. But one of the key consistent parts of all of this is simply that the time it takes to break through is halved every time. The Asian tigers, it's 30 years. Given where technology is and is going, leadership that's focused and understands where it needs to go gets this done in another 20 years. But are we ready for that? Now, this is me speaking as a macroeconomist. Every time I look at our data and people tell me, oh, the economy is very volatile. Yeah, I don't dispute that. The GDP numbers are very clear. It's one of the most volatile parameters for the Nigerian economy. But the parameter, the volatility, is imparted by external factors, not domestic factors. By external factors, not domestic factors. What else should I tell you before I kind of close up? And it is folly of the highest order. Mr. Baker made a point which I think is extremely valuable, that if you look over the last 30 years, ups and downs kind of even up, and on average we're growing. But there's also been some very fundamental changes to the structure of the Nigerian economy. A lot of people still make a lot of noise about diversification, and I tell them that, sorry, Nigeria now has a diversified economy. We have 46 sectors. Only 2 of these 46 sectors are contributing making double-digit contributions to the economy. Agriculture is doing 23, trading is doing 17. 3 of them. Manufacturing is doing 10. All the other 43 are single-digit contributors. Where we still need diversification is the role that oil plays in FX and in government revenues. And of course, when you talk about oil, you must always talk about Nigeria's myth of being oil-rich. We always convince ourselves, oh, we're an oil-rich country. You know how you throw your chests? Oil-rich, Abi. Oh, the 6th largest reserves in the world. Indeed, probably the 5th largest reserves of gas. But I invite people to do a small calculation with me. I say to them, okay, oil-rich, Abi, let's do the numbers. How many barrels of crude oil do we produce daily? 2 million? Yes, now. It's not even 2 million, because OPEC means we are doing 1.6, but once you add condensates, it takes you to about 1.8, 1.9 million. But take 2 million, ease of calculation, which means every year you're doing probably just under 800 million barrels. Divide that by 200 million. Each and every one of us in this country is entitled to 4 barrels of crude oil annually. 4 barrels of crude oil annually. At current rates of about $60 a barrel, that's $240 per person, man, woman, and child annually. I have some friends here, and I will not say Tayo to Banjo, but when I'm looking at the cost of their jacket, it is more than $240, which kind of suggests that they have consumed their own and are consuming other people's shares. Now, that should tell you something. Rich? Not really. You want to know rich? Think about the Saudis. In 2018, Aramco, which is the Saudi equivalent of NNPC, paid the Saudi government dividend of $56.8 billion US. That's the entire budget of all the governments of Nigeria. But that you may say, so what? But let's really talk rich. 10 million barrels of crude oil per day. 30 million people. You're talking of each Saudi going to bed, waking up every day and being entitled annually to about $7,000 US just for waking up. That's one country you really don't want to die in. Your share of the money goes to someone else. So, they're rich, we are dependent. They're rich, we are dependent. And our dependence on oil And the price of oil, the quantity of oil, imparts massive volatility to output, to exchange rates. Okay? One other thing. As I was saying, if you look over the last 30 years, Nigeria has actually made some progress. And this is one of the key things that I think business executives need to keep their eyes peeled for. In 2003, the average Nigerian, in terms of the basket, the food basket, the consumption basket, spent 64% of their income on food and non-alcoholic beverages. By 2009, 6 years later, the figure had dropped to 51. As of today, 10 years later, we're calculating inflation on that 2009 basket. My colleagues and I in the office did a little study. We're currently doing a study of 25,000 households across Nigeria, trying to understand the patterns of income and expenditure. Don't worry, you'll all get a letter from me shortly. But that's not the interesting thing. As a pilot for this survey, we did 3 states. 1 was too close to the election, so it didn't go well, but 2 went very well. Lagos and Rivers. In Lagos State, spending on food and non-alcoholic beverages is 23%. In Rivers State, it's 32%. In other words, notwithstanding what we may say, I've spoken to you about the evolution of our productive patterns. Agriculture and what we call the primary sectors have declined, services have shot up, manufacturing has stayed pretty constant. We can't afford that. But in terms of our spending, we're actually evolving away from being a subsistence-driven economy into more lifestyle. Because if you're spending 23%, in fact, the one part of it that stunned me is that in Lagos, 10% of household spend is on eating out. Yes. Oh, in Rivers, it's about 3%. But then what also stunned me is that Lagos and Rivers, one of the reasons we actually chose Rivers was oil. But what became very clear from the outcome of the survey is that, they may be producing oil there, but that's not where oil money is. No, seriously. Group AB in Lagos, average monthly income is about 2 million. Group AB in Rivers, average monthly income is about 500,000. Indeed, C1 in Lagos is 750,000. The only place where Rivers bests Lagos is in DE. In Lagos, DE is 47,000, it's 49,000 in Rivers. In other words, huge disparities in income. If AB is 2 million and DE is 47,000, and by the way, none of them pays more than 7,000 a month in taxes. They pay more in donations. I'll leave you to work out to whom these donations go. All that I'm at liberty to say is that it appears people in these 2 jurisdictions are determined to make heaven at all costs. If you're selling salvation, you're onto a good thing. But the point I'm simply trying to drive is that the structure of spend has changed. Yes, I know that Lagos and Rivers cannot be used to speak for the country. No problem. But at least we are seeing that over a long period of time, Nigeria behaves in pretty much the way you expect her to behave. That as income has grown, $2,000 on average, but don't forget, Nigeria is not one country. There are people whose incomes are lower than in South Sudan, and there are people whose incomes are higher than in Switzerland. Some of you are from the financial services sector. If you look at the numbers, they're crazy. 40 million BVN roughly. about 110 million bank accounts. But guess what? 100 of these 40 million BVN holders are responsible for half of the lending that the banks make. Lending to households, don't let's go there. And yet, everybody is in retail. I'm still trying to work that part out. Oh, but they do remind me that small and medium-scale companies are part of retail. And I'm like, oh, right, now it makes sense. Essentially, what you're saying is that outside of the top households, and it's something which I found a bit interesting, that when you look at the households in this country, and you break them up by deciles, and this is publicly available information, this is nothing proprietary, NBS puts this out, that between 2004 and 2016, the 10% at the top are the only group whose share of consumption rose. Every other group saw a decline in their share of consumption. What's that saying? I spoke about inequality. We're running on an economy that consumers are under tremendous pressure. Tremendous pressure. When they say minimum wage, I smile. When I look at the figures for minimum wage, the first time minimum wages happened in this country, guess what was the dollar value? It was $204 was minimum wage. The latest at 30,000 is about $80. So what have we done? Okay, so what? So where does all of this lead? It leads in the following direction in my book. First of all, businesses cannot adopt a one-size-fits-all for Nigeria. Remember what I said. There are consumers whose incomes are lower than in South Sudan, and there are consumers' incomes who are higher than in Switzerland. How well all of you talk about customer intimacy. But there's a question I pose to many companies, and when I'm looking for trouble, I say to them, all these your customers, where do they earn their income from? Which sectors of the economy do they earn their own income from? Because if your portfolio of customers is skewed in the direction of a particular sector, then you are carrying sector risk in addition to general market risk. And guess what? Very few people know. So for me, first thing, Nigeria is not one size. It's a very diverse country. Oh yeah, I've told you all the things around income concentrating upwards. It's not a Nigeria-specific phenomenon. It's just that it's probably worse here than in most other jurisdictions, the data that I have seen. The second thing that's very important, everybody, really, any which way you're going to do it, you're going to have to build portfolios that are economy resistant. Sorry, the number of people who are writing, you owe me. But truthfully, you're going to have to build product portfolios that are economy resistant. Because any which way, again, I'm not saying anything that Mr. Magunda Baker hadn't said earlier, probably slightly different words, but any which way you look at it, the way this economy is primed to behave means, yeah, there is a game to be played at the bottom, there's a game to be played at the top, there's a game to be played in the middle. But you've got to ensure that whatever happens to the economy, if it is growing, they're patronizing you. If it is slowing, they're patronizing you. If it is shrinking, they're patronizing you. And guess what? 20% of Nigeria's economy is actually still shrinking, even though we are out of recession. Remember I told you 46 sectors. Abi? 20% of them are still shrinking. Only 12 of them, 12% of them are growing faster than population growth. All the others, which means about 66% or thereabout, are growing roughly below population. 20% shrinking, 66% growing sub 3%, only 12% growing post 3%. Now, these are the trends that you really need to understand. Let me add one more thing. Nigeria's economy, and I suspect like many emerging market economies, is one of those economies that invites you on a regular basis to ask, what if? Even things that appear unlikely, your scenario planning should ask, what if? Imagine, let's go back, 2013, Nigeria's economy was growing 6-7%. If at that time you had asked yourself, what if affordability becomes a problem? By 2016, affordability was a problem. Indeed, I have friends whose businesses asked that question then, launched value brands then, and are reaping the benefits of those value brands today. Essentially, it's about a granular understanding of the marketplaces in which you play. Failure to do that, it's not that this economy doesn't provide opportunity, huge opportunity. You must understand its dynamics. You must understand the dynamics at play in your sectors. But one last thing, the companies you run are behaving as if you don't understand the need to engage with regulators. Oh yes, before you tell me, oh, regulator-regulated relationships are this, are that, are the other. Yes, but guess what? Failure to engage with regulators. Well, no, let me change that. If you are always going to engage with your regulators on your knees, then you're not going very far. The engagement with regulators, whilst it may not be on an equal footing, cannot continue on the basis of the current cat and mouse games that get to be played. Why? I'm sure everybody here has heard that book title, Who Moved My Cheese? Abi? I tell my Nigerian colleagues who run corporates that your cheese won't be moved, it will be taken. Thank you very much.